Happy Thursday. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Triphi. I'm a psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia. This month is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. On Thursdays, I show up to teach skills, tips, strategies to help us think better so we can feel better and hopefully we can do better. I'm launching straight off into a story and I want you to listen. Short story about John. John is a 35-year-old construction worker. His father taught him everything he knew, and they ran the business together. John's father passed away. And when that happened, John was beside himself, but he didn't allow himself to cry. Over time, John became increasingly irritable and withdrawn. He was angry all the time. To try to cope, he started smoking a little weed. He started with weed at first, then alcohol, and began to progress. Escalated to a little meth and a little fentanyl. He OD'd twice on fentanyl. He couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. His wife left. I'm originally from Dominica in the Caribbean. Dominica is a tiny island, and not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. We're between Guadeloupe and Martinique. In the Caribbean, in Dominica in particular, we're raised with the sun, the beach, steel pan, reggae, calypso, and bouillon music. Bouillon music, Bouyon. Go check it out on YouTube. You will not regret it. But in the Caribbean, we're also raised with silence, especially our boys. Traditionally, our boys are taught to man up, don't cry, be strong. What are you crying about? Don't be a... Very few families teach our boys how to feel, or that it's okay to feel their emotions. So I thought tonight, since most of the men who listen to me are from the Caribbean, I thought tonight that we might unlearn some of these lies and hopefully begin healing. My topic tonight is the top 4, really it's 3 plus 1, yeah? 5 plus 5 is 55. If you're from Dominica, you got the joke. Top 3 lies plus 1 that men have been taught about emotions and the truth that heals. So I'm going to start. I'm going to go back to John's story. One big lie our men are taught is that crying is a sign of weakness, or even worse, horror of horrors for many of our men, it's a sign that you're feminine. Oh my goodness. What's the truth? I mean, the truth is that sadness is just as valid an emotion as joy, anger, helplessness, anxiety, powerlessness, feeling alone, feeling abandoned, feeling desperate. Those are all human emotions. So sadness, if I'm feeling sad as a human being, male or female, I'm alive. And in John's story, isn't that a perfectly rational and reasonable emotional response to your father dying. Yeah, it's not completely rational. In our culture, we cry at funerals. We cry at funerals, but I think after the funeral, if a man is barely allowed to have a few tears, after that, not so much, not so much anymore, because we've taught our boys that crying makes them soft. What do we have? What do we have uh, as a result? A tendency to bottle up emotions. And then what happens when you bottle up emotions? You have what's called emotional suppression. Now, try to imagine you were on the beach and you had a beach ball and you blew it up and you went out into the sea, right? So you could float. And you decided you were going to try to keep that ball under the seawater. Would you succeed? Not for long, because that ball would pop up. And that's how emotions, that's how they work. When we try to suppress them, they find a way to pop up. Except that the way they pop up often is in ways that culturally are looked at as more acceptable. So, anger, isolation. I mentioned here what John did was smoking a little something, something, a little tokes. Yeah, alcohol. It's acceptable to drink, get drunk, suppress emotions. And where there's access to harder drugs, many people escalate their use because if you're not exploring and processing and managing and really feeling the feeling that is showing up in your body is going to find a way to deal with it. Another way that sadness can manifest is violence. Yeah, the irritability morphs into anger, morphs into, well, I'm going to use my fists. So we're going to get into fights. I can't begin to tell you the number of men I've spoken to who, as a result of grieving, as a result of grief, essentially put themselves in a position to get beat up. Essentially put themselves in a position to get beat up. And some of our men go as far as what in this field we call suicide by cop, where they provoke a situation with police, knowing full well that what they're doing might expose them to the possibility that the police might have to respond with deadly force. It happens more than we acknowledge. So imagine that. Imagine that instead of crying, which is a natural response to sadness, I put myself in a position to be taken out. That's how far that goes. Imagine that instead of crying and feeling my emotion of sadness, I start using substances to numb the pain. And because of the way the brain works, I have to use more and more and more and more, or I have to change what I'm using to get the same effect I used to get when I started using this one. And then I put myself in a position to where now the things that used to be important to me, they fall apart. So for John, over time, he became increasingly angry, irritable, withdrawn, isolated. that eventually led to a breakdown of his marriage, lost access to his kids for 2 years. 2 years. He was out there trying to figure it out, essentially grieving, essentially trying to feel. Yeah, trying to feel, but really not doing it efficiently. The truth is, crying is a natural release. It's a natural emotional release. Some people even call it a way of coping. It's a coping skill, right? Because it's a natural response to loss, natural response to sadness, natural response to grief. Yeah, it is healthy to process your grief. It's healthy to process your stress or deep feelings, and trying to keep it, uh, trying to bottle it up can lead to explosive anger, can also lead to numbness where people just shut down their feelings. But when you shut down, you also block access to other emotions that you need. And you keep, imagine building a wall to keep yourself safe, but forgetting that you needed to at least have a gate so that you could allow inside what you needed or what other people needed from you. So this happens to many of our men because even if you're taught that crying is a sign of weakness, you're a human being. And you will face situations where your body will respond with sadness. You're not a block of wood, you're not a piece of metal. So for John, after seeking therapy, John managed to kind of pull himself together. And throughout the course of treatment, John learned to embrace his feelings. What does that mean? That means to acknowledge that I'm a human being. Yeah. And when the sadness shows up, acknowledge that the sadness is in my body. Yeah. For John, he found that allowing himself to cry, nobody's asking John to be on the street bawling, booing, right? I've sometimes prescribed crying to people, as in after work, go home, let it go. John found that that brought him relief and it helped him process his grief in a healthier way. He started writing a journal. What's a journal? I mean, a journal is just a little $1 book, a composition book, a booklet. A journal could be in your phone, in your note section. A journal could be a video blog that you start, yeah, where you start writing or talking about your feelings. What John did is he started writing letters to his kids about how he was doing, how he was feeling, what was going on with him 2 years ago, right? And little by little, he was able to start reconnecting with his kids. He had lost his wife. She was not coming back. But his 14-year-old son started replying. His 14-year-old son started replying. And last I heard, his daughter was continuing to receive his letters, but she wasn't ready yet. Because something we might think is so simple as, well, I don't want to cry. It can start a snowball effect that can hurt not just you, but a lot of the people around you. Not just you, but a lot of the people around you. And you end up losing things and people that are important to you when really all it takes is learning how to express those emotions that in particular you were taught men don't have that. But that doesn't make sense because men do have that. Okay? It doesn't make sense because men do have that. So, what makes sense is for men who do have that, as in feelings of sadness, to learn how to feel sad without losing themselves, without hurting other people, without hurting themselves. Okay, so for me, that's lie number one. Lie number two is that feeling your emotions makes you irrational. I'm gonna give you a story, right? Listen. Michael is a 28-year-old young man. And 4 years ago, he lost his son. 4 years ago, his baby was 2 years old and his baby died as a result of illness. The baby got sick and died. Within the span of 4 years, and it started with his baby son, he lost a grandfather on his mom's side. And he says, that was my dog. That's the way he says, that was my dog. Yeah. And then his other grandpa died on his father's side. I think he also says that one of his homeboys died while the homeboy was in prison. 4 losses within the span of 4 years. Those of you who've had people die on you, like back to back to back to back, you understand that you barely have had time to grieve the loss of one, and then another one hits. And then for another one to hit and another one to hit. Yeah. So Michael, he'd been doing well in the community, but that series of events set him up because a year later he ended up incarcerated for aggravated assault. It's aggravated assault, he popped somebody. So that irritability, that failure to feel, because for him, emotions we're not manly, because in his mind, men are logical. Yeah. And if he was to feel his emotions, he would be irrational. Okay. Now, as a human being, when you do that, again, that's not controlling your emotions, that is suppressing it. Yeah. And I promise you, it's going to find a way to come out. So with Michael, it took him a while to see the connection between him being locked up as a result of aggravated assault and then tracking it back to really starting with his 2-year-old dying. And then wham, his grandpa, first grandpa, the second grandpa, and then a homeboy. So he had suppressed his feelings. He's got, he's a young guy, but great ideas about business that he had already started, but he couldn't complete it. And his life got interrupted because he had been taught that feeling your emotions as a man makes you irrational. The irony is he ended up taking irrational action with that aggravated assault. So real wisdom is being able to identify what it is you're feeling, to name what it is you're feeling, right? To describe it, to be able to observe your body, to be able to almost be like outside of yourself, yeah? And observe your body feeling whatever it is you're feeling. The idea of just sucking it up. When you suck it up, where does it go? The idea of don't be so sensitive. Who would not be sensitive after losing a baby? Who would not be sensitive after losing a grandpa you call, that was my dog right there. That was my dog right there. Who wouldn't be sensitive? Yeah, as in feeling their emotions deeply after losing a homeboy. Yeah, so when we suppress our feelings, understand that they do not disappear. They find another way out. And a lot of our men find ways to rationalize that. Yeah, because they're trying to be rational, but they end up missing the connection. So their insight, their ability to see inside of themselves, they also block that off. Yeah, so your suffering might end up being longer than necessary because you're not identifying the true problem. You're not making the true connection because you're already basing your actions on a faulty premise. The faulty premise is that feeling my emotions makes me irrational. That's a faulty premise because you're a human being. You're a human being with blood. Yeah, flesh and bones and emotions too. Okay? Emotions are bits of data. Your emotions, your response to losing a child is information. I am in pain. I just experienced a loss. I am grieving. Really, I will expect that because I'm a human being. And I have to expect that it's probably going to take me some time to process all of that through my body, for all of these feelings to kind of pass through me, whether or not I'm in a male body or a female body. Okay? So when men understand that about their physical body and they use tools to manage that more efficiently, then the decisions they make are more, they're based on awareness, they're based on truth. And it's not as if you're just, well, I'm just responding, oh, that person, say the following year after my son died, where I ended up in that aggravated assault situation. That person pissed me off. But hey, you forgot everything that was stacking up, that built up to that moment. So we have to start from the beginning. And the beginning is feeling what you're feeling, acknowledging it, naming it, describing it, and responding to that piece of information from a place of understanding and clarity. Yeah. For Michael's recovery looked like this. So Michael began to state to himself sentences like, I respect my emotions. Yeah. I respect my emotions. I respect my feelings. I respect my emotions. Because if you understand that emotions are, they're information, they're telling you something about yourself and your experience as a human being, versus they're making a statement about your manhood, yeah, then you can look at it more clearly. He started attending grief therapy. He started attending grief therapy and started learning among a group of other people who were experiencing similar losses. Yeah, that he was not alone, that he wasn't weird, that his responses emotionally actually made sense, and that they were not irrational. Okay, so that's the second lie. And again, the truth is that emotions are essential pieces of data. essential pieces of information. They're telling us something. And when they show up, they're asking us to do something. Yeah? Sometimes that thing to do, again, is just to observe it, describe it, yeah, feel it, allow it to pass, versus what many people do, which is to actively try to pretend I'm not feeling it or to shut it down. That's emotional suppression. When we do it like that, it's like the ball, the beach ball we're trying to press underwater is going to pop up. And usually it's going to pop up out of your control. Yeah. 6 months from now, a year from now, in some really nasty situation. That's not necessary. That's not necessary. And emotionally, it's not wise. It's not intelligent emotionally. Okay. All right. Lie number three. Lie number three that many of our men learn is that you have to handle everything on your own. I got this. I'm a man. I got this. And that seeking help, asking for help, especially again when it comes to your emotions, makes you less of a man. So this is David's story. David is a 40-year-old teacher, and David prided himself on being self-reliant. When he started experiencing symptoms of depression, he tried to manage it alone. Now, what were his symptoms? He started hating getting out of bed. His motivation and his energy for doing his daily activities became lower. He started having trouble staying asleep. So he'd go to bed, he'd be restless, he'd fall asleep, but he'd wake up a lot at night. David had been divorced. He gave up dating. He used to hang with his friends on the weekend. He gave that up. He stopped doing those activities because it started feeling like extra work. So his energy was just feeling like he was moving through slush, is the way he described it. And life started feeling heavier and darker. His condition worsened, affecting his work and his personal life. Okay, what is that about? Isolation, yeah, aloneness, doing it alone is not the same thing as being an independent person. Real strength is not independence, like I'm just a ship sailing in the night by myself, and I'm in suffering and I'm going to suffer in silence. Nobody's going to know. Yeah. Yeah, man, I cool, man. Yeah, man, I'm good. Yeah, man, you see your brothers, you see your husbands, you see your friends, and you see them under pressure, or what else might be in the background of their lives, and they're telling you, man, I cool, man, I good, man, I good. A lot of times that's pride pretending to be strength. Because again, isolation is not independence. Real strength is really interdependence, like being able to access resources, access support from people around us. Isolation is when we shut the rest of the world out. It's a pretense. I don't need anybody. And when you dig deeper, usually it's rooted in fear or pride or pain from the past. Like, when you maybe tried to depend on other people, they weren't there. Or you didn't have that as a model. You didn't see that. Yeah. It looks like suffering in silence. It looks like not trusting anybody else. And it looks like feeling as if asking for help makes you weak. So it's like, yeah, I got this. Meanwhile, you're barely holding it together. Hmm? What the sweet spot, again, is interdependence. One of the factors that adds to our longevity on the planet is social support. And it's not just for women. It's not just for women. It's not just for women. Social support, reciprocity. I'm doing for, but I'm also receiving. It's uniting with other people without losing your essence or your own identity. Yeah. So it'll say, you know what, we're stronger together versus, yeah, I got this. You know, I'm the only one. I can't depend on anybody else. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I got me. Yeah, yeah. You know, you got to be strong as a man. We get it. You know, I'm a mom. You know, you're trying your best to train your boy, your young man. You got to be able to handle yourself. Yes, as a man, you got to have yourself. But you also have to know you don't have to do everything alone. You do not have to do everything alone. I think too many of our men are taught that, you know, like a king, I'm a king. But when you look out at kings, are kings building their kingdoms alone? You ever seen a king and he's the only one in the kingdom? No. What great kings do is they keep even expanding on their kingdoms by marrying their kids off, connecting their businesses with other people, right? They go outside, they stretch out, versus I'm just here like this, alone. So, asking for support, that's the truth. Asking for support. And really, I think knowing when to ask for support and knowing how to ask for support is important as well. Asking for support, knowing who to ask for support is a sign of emotional intelligence as well. Because some people might say, well, I'm not going to ask because I already know I'm not going to get help. Well, don't ask where you know you're not going to get help, you know? You see what I'm saying? But asking for support is a sign of courage and self awareness. And we have to, if we don't have those skills, we have to learn to make connections with people that we can rely on. So we have to learn to choose people, to read people, to make good judgments about who we can ask for help. It's networking, yeah, but making wise choices about who we will network with. That idea of reciprocity, where you're not the only one giving and doing for, because connection, social support, and the vulnerability it takes to reach outside of yourself for that person who might have a connection that you don't have. They might know who you need to work with that you don't know yet. That's a skill. And that's how we grow and build. That's how the king builds a kingdom. It's not a sign of weakness. Okay? So, what did David do to get better? David, like I said, was a teacher. David, to get better, David used his EAP. Over here, EAP is Employee Assistance Program. And most places of business have an HR or human resource department that is able to organize 3 sessions, 5 sessions, 8 sessions, 10 sessions, 12 sessions if you're really, really lucky. If you're working with a company who invests a lot in that. Free sessions before you even use your health insurance and you have to pay. Okay? He came in at the recommendation of a co-worker, his principal. He used those work-related benefits. Yeah, because the principal noticed that he had started making mistakes on the job, was late, overly late, with assignments, lesson plans, things like that. And the principal suggested he go talk to someone. And part of how we worked together was getting David to begin to reach out. Okay, yeah, you're divorced, you're alone, your life feels like it's caving in on you. Social support, and the other factor, social engagement, interacting with other people outside of ourselves, two of the factors that contribute the most to longevity, to living a long life and a healthy life and a reasonably comfortable, happy life emotionally. What David did is he reached out to a men's support group at his church, and he also joined the welcoming committee at his church. He continued with one on one therapy and started reframing, resetting his original beliefs about asking for help. Because now he began to see that knowing who to ask for help, when to ask for help, how to ask for help, those were strengths and not weaknesses. They did not make him weaker, they made him stronger as a man because now he was widening his network, meeting so many more people now, free of charge on a Sunday, free on a Sunday. And his mental health began to improve significantly. Last thing I heard, he was dating again. Found himself a nice little lady at church, nice little church lady. Okay? And I'm not using people's actual names here, but yeah. The point is that it's the truth. We've created this narrative that has helped us, you know, it helps us. I think it helps to clarify roles, and that was very comforting. There are lots of positives to people having clear demarcations of what is expected of them in a community, in a home. I like that. It's a certain predictability and safety, but because it's so rigid, it's a bit unrealistic and it could potentially become a dangerous narrative. If the narrative is that asking for help makes you weak and less than, then utilizing a powerful skill such as networking, you might look at it like, well, in Dominica, they call it, I don't want to be anybody's boom boom fly. I don't want to be anybody's, up here, they call it brown nosing, like you got your nose in the brown stuff. Yeah. Um, Also, if you think about it, in the Caribbean, community is our strength. Village life, the idea of kudme is a Dominica principle where in practice, what people of our parents' generation would do is this week, everybody would go to this one person's farm and help them plant, or help them harvest, or help them weed. Next week, we would go to the other neighbors. Next week, we would go to the other neighbors. And so the culture used to have those things built into the system to make it where asking for help was more comfortable. But I don't know that it's as comfortable asking for help anymore. But I think it's very important. I think men need safe spaces to be able to say, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. Man, wee, without shame. Without shame. Okay, without shame. Or else some of our men are out there carrying too many heavy burdens alone. Too many heavy burdens alone. Okay, so those are my top three. And then I have an extra one that we will all recognize because we're talking about it so much these days. Everybody on the mic is talking about it. Women are wrestling with the idea, men are wrestling with the idea. Line number 4 in my mind is that men are only here to provide. You know, the only business. I have a problem with that. That men are providers. Yeah. And yeah, their primary role is to provide financially, and everything else is secondary. They're here for the wallet, and we don't care how they feel. We don't care if they fall out giving us the wallet, you know? Um, Here's an example of James, who's a 45-year-old engineer, focused solely only on his career to provide for his family, because he's bought into the idea that's what he's here for. He's a provider. Great. However, all James did was work. Even his fun times were with work staff. You know the idea of a work wife? He got himself one of those. Yeah. His emotional needs and his relationships now with his family, with his own wife, his legal wife, and his kids started to suffer. And over time, James felt more and more isolated and unfulfilled, even with work. So, after a heart to heart conversation with his wife, who told him, "Bro, you're spending too much time at work. Yeah, you know, we like the nice things, but we're not seeing you." The kids were also having a hard time because he wasn't there to go to any of their games, come to school to see what they were doing in their extracurricular. Yeah, so he was very frustrated, James was, because he was like, I'm doing everything for them and they're being ungrateful. They're being unappreciative. I don't know how long I want to stay in this family because they don't appreciate me. It took a little while. It took a little restructuring of some of these beliefs right here, this one being men are only providers, to help James to see the fact that you're a provider is excellent, beautiful. Your family is telling you they appreciate it. However, they need more from you. They were asking you for your presence. They're asking for more of your presence, of yourself. Yeah. So the isolation and the separation that is as a result of him just working, working, and working led to a lack of quality time between him and his wife and his kids. And so he was trying to solve one big problem, you know, the idea of providing, but it was also creating additional problems and additional pain for the other members of the family and for him as well. Yeah, and for him as well. What's the truth? What's the truth? Men are multifaceted individuals with feelings too, with emotions too, with their own social needs, with their own psychological needs. And being a provider is just one of those aspects of your identity. It's really just one. It's just one. You're more than what you give. Men deserve to receive too. So there has to be reciprocity. And with him, with James, for him, his reciprocity, what he wanted was to hear and to feel the feeling of appreciation. But that became hard for his family because they were feeling isolated from him. So it was painful for them to be without him for so long. So it started hurting both. Yeah, both him and the wife, him and the kids. So, in addition to teaching our kids, our boys about providing for, yeah, and being, you know, controlling the wallet, It's also important to train our men, to train our young men about the value of who they are as people, like just their emotional presence. Their presence in the space is important. Their nurturing in the home is important. Their protection, their presence to be able to protect, their laughter, their jokes, their wisdom. That's important too. That's part of providing as well. Yeah. So we broaden the scope, we broaden the understanding of what provision is to not just money, but time, yeah, your gifts, your sense of humor, again, just your presence as a human being, as that force, yeah, in the home is part of providing. It's not just about the wallet. I think that's a lie. Because when you talk to people, you talk to many people who will tell you, yeah, my dad provided well for us, but he was very distant. They grow up wounded too. They grow up hurt too. And many of them wish that they had fewer nice things, but they had more of their father's presence. Yeah. They wish that their dad wasn't so exhausted when he came home that all he did was sit in his rocking chair and say, leave me alone. Presence is important. So negotiating, all right, well, maybe I work a few hours less and I use those hours for more time with the family. More time with the family. So for James, at first, James thought, like I said, like his family was being ungrateful, right? But he agreed to make a shift and he made some adjustments after he and the wife and the kids had a little family meeting. And what he started doing was prioritizing more family time. Yeah. He started introducing the kids to some of his hobbies, card games, dominoes, yeah, outside stuff, throwing ball. And even he himself started to find joy, like his little kid self again, doing that and reconnecting with his family because he was able to increase his level of self care. Something that he found helpful was making about 30 minutes before bedtime just to check in with the kids. Didn't have to be long. Check in with the kids and his wife before he went off to sleep, before he was falling out. He was so exhausted. And they started rearranging some of their weekend time so that he wouldn't go back to the office, he wouldn't go back to work, but that they would spend more of that time together. So the family had to make a trade-off too, Yes, women like nice things, but they changed up, they switched up what the nice things were. Yeah? As in time, attention, affection, fun, yeah, being with. I think that life is about, like relationships, is about negotiation and renegotiation. I say that because what worked when the kids were little might not work when they're in high school. So you got to renegotiate. You got to reset, move things around a little bit. But it's also about honesty. It's about saying what you're truly feeling. And how will you know what you're truly feeling if you're not paying attention to it or if you're just suppressing it? How will you know? Yeah. Life is about clarity, learning ourselves well enough so we can share ourselves, our true selves, with other people. So that when they meet us, they're meeting the real person versus our representatives. Versus our representatives. So, these tonight have been my top 3 plus 1 lies that all men have been taught. And this month of June, as we hit Father's Day, as we hit Father's Day, I know the fellas complain that the mothers get all the attention. uh, there are many reasons for that. There are many reasons for that. I want to encourage you, if your father's alive, regardless of the relationship, to try and do something special. Try and do something special. Try and acknowledge, at the very least, that this person contributed to your presence on the planet. Yeah, at the very least, they contributed to your presence on the planet. And I know it's not easy. I know it's the way that men have been taught to be with their emotions. It can cause a lot of pain. It can cause a lot of pain. But there's a reason that therapy and therapeutic approaches and strategies exist. If there's life, there's hope. I encourage you to talk to a therapist, get some help, read a book, heal those relationships, make them a little better. All right? Thank you all for watching. When you come upon this, leave a comment, like, share. I'm Dr. Triphi. Happy Thursday. Nous que parler dans l'autre fois. Peace.